Good day! Welcome to our first session in Research 1 for this school year. I hope you are all okay and ready to learn new things. My name is Sir Jess and I am your Research 1 teacher. I am handling science subject as well. Today, we shall explore with the first topic about scientific method. I hope we have with you your Quarter 1, Module 1 for our subject. Kindly get your module if you do not have it with you. Are you ready to learn? Let us begin. But before we start, let me share with you our weekly home learning plan for the first week in our subject Research 1. As you can see in this learning plan, I have listed the learning activities that are expected for you to accomplish for this week. First, I want you to read and understand thoroughly the subject description, and then test the existing knowledge by answering the pre-assessment entitled Explore Your Understanding with 4 different points, and then check the answers in the pre-assessment 1 to 10 only. Followed by, you need to do and accomplish the KWL chart by supplying information of what you know, what do you want to know, and what you have and what you already learned. Next, read and go over with an overview of the scientific method as well as on how to formulate research problem and a hypothesis. Followed by, answer activity 1.1 by interviewing 20 adults in order to gather the necessary data, and then answer the four guide questions that follow. Do activity 1.2 wherein 4 pictures are presented, and then one should identify the problem represented by the said pictures as to make your own hypothesis out of it. And then complete the module by reflecting on the things you have learned. So these are the learning activities or tasks required from you for this week 1. But before we proceed with the topic itself regarding the scientific method, let me share with you our course and subject description. So this is some sort of an introduction to the subject. I know you're asking, why is it that you have your Research 1 as to your subject compared to other grade 8 sections na wala po nito? Research 1 is an elective subject for special science class. Research 1 is a course in the special science curriculum that is designed to equip students with essential scientific attitudes and skills that will prepare them in conducting scientific or science investigations. These skills include observing, inferring, classifying, predicting, communicating, formulating hypotheses, identifying variables, describing the relationship between variables, designing investigation, experimenting, and writing simple scientific report. Moreover, this course provides an excellent groundwork or prerequisite course for higher research works. Okay? So since this is an extension or an elective subject, the grading system you will be following is the same with science. Okay, so whatever grading system of your Science 8 subject, that is also true to the Research 1. So in your module, what you can see there first is for you to answer the pre-assessment entitled Explore Your Understanding. So in your answer sheet, I want you to write your answers for this pre-assessment. So for part A, you are to choose the letter of the correct answer and write your answers on a separate sheet. Okay, so we have the first 3 questions po. You read them and then select your answer from these options. We also have questions number 4 and questions number 5, as you can see in your module. And then For part B, you need to answer this test. It's an identification test. For number 6 to 10, identify what science processes are revealed in the following statements. Write your answer on the space provided after the number. Okay, so we have 6 items there, and you are going to choose your answer from the box above. Okay, so just select one from them. Okay, you may or you may repeat your answers. You may or you may not repeat your answers. Okay. Then for part C, you need to read the following story and then follow the directions below. Okay. So a science student conducted a study of the ability of vertebrate blood to carry oxygen. He believed that a low environmental temperature would cause the organism's blood to carry less oxygen than blood at a higher temperature. The following reflects the student's experiment and the data he collected. So out from that experiment, okay, you can see below the different data that he collected. So these statements are true according to the experiment conducted. After those statements, another thing that is reflected in your module is the table as shown in this video. Okay, so table 1 has the data for temperature in degrees Celsius. Column 1 rather. Column number 2, we have the amount of dissolved oxygen found in fish in tank A. It's parts per million. Column number 3, we have another temperature in degrees Celsius. Okay, and column number 4, we have here still the amount of dissolved oxygen, but this time it's for the tank. After the table presented in the module, you are to answer a number of questions. First, what is the hypothesis of the above experiment? Followed by the question, is the above experiment a controlled experiment? Explain your answer. And third, what is the variable factor in the above experiment? So again, this is just a pre-test or diagnostic test just to measure your understanding regarding our topic. And then after that, as you can see here, for the fourth instruction, you are to graph the data above and then answer the questions that follow. So you are to graph for tank A, and then another graph for the data for tank B. And then after which, you need to answer questions number 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so after that, you need to check your answers from the answer key found or located at the end of your module. But take note, you are to check only the first part of that. Okay, so we now come to the discussion regarding the scientific method. I hope this will aid you in learning the scientific method. Some of you have this understanding regarding the topic, but I will just reiterate and refresh your knowledge on this specific topic. So the scientific method involves a series of steps that are used to investigate a natural occurrence. Okay, so it's a method, it's a step-by-step process in order for you to arrive at an answer. Okay, for a problem that is posted, okay, or a phenomenon that is somewhat bothering you. So it's carefully crafted step-by-step procedures for you to investigate a certain occurrence. We shall take a closer look at these steps and the terminology you will need to understand before you start a science project. So therefore, our topic is scientific method. It's basically the first topic because you need to be familiarized with this step-by-step procedure before you come up with a scientific experiment or science project. Okay? So there are different versions of scientific methods. Like actually, we can summarize scientific method in the following steps. First, you need to have your problem or question. Followed by, after that, you need to formulate a hypothesis. Third, you need to conduct an experiment. Fourth, collect and analyze results. Fifth, you need to have your conclusion, draft your conclusion. And then last is for you to communicate the result. So this is how scientific method is being summarized. Okay? I hope you can recall these procedures. Let's go over with the different steps of the scientific method. Let's start with the first one. Problem or questions. In this step for scientific method, you need to develop a question or problem that can be solved with an experiment. Okay, so we basically start with a problem or questions that can be solved, because not all questions or problems are researchable or can be solved. Next, you are to formulate a hypothesis. It's a prediction to answer the problem or a question. Okay, if you can still recall your science 7 or your elementary science, you understood the concept of hypothesis already, right? Okay, so you know the meaning already. Hypothesis is an educated guess to basically answer a problem or question. So an example about a hypothesis is given below. Okay, if soil temperatures rise, then plant growth will increase. So that statement is an example of a hypothesis. Third, experiment. Conducting an experiment. An experiment is a procedure to test the hypothesis. It includes a detailed materials or list, and the outcome must be measurable or quantifiable. Okay, so an experiment, you know that in your science subject, you always conduct an experiment. So it's a detailed procedure, okay, in order to test if your hypothesis is correct or true or untrue. Okay, and then fourth step for the scientific method is for you to collect and analyze results. Collect and interpret the data from the experiment. In this method or step, okay, you use tables and graphs to organize your data or your information. That's how we collect and analyze results. We usually transform them into tables and graphs in order to organize. For the fifth step, you are to write your conclusion. A conclusion is a summary of what was learned during the experiment. Here, you can accept or reject your hypothesis. Okay? So either of the two, that's your conclusion. That's the result. Okay? And then, after that, you need to communicate the result. You need to share the result with others. Okay? Why do we need to share the result? Because that's the purpose of scientific method. In order to answer an existing or a problem which you do not comprehend at first. Okay? And then one good thing is for you to share the result with others, right? Okay, that's the purpose of science, sharing what we know, sharing what we have found out to other people. Now let's put our knowledge of the scientific method to a realistic example that includes some of the terms you'll be needing to use and understand. Okay, so those steps here we will be applying it now. For example, we have John. John watches his grandmother bake bread. He asked his grandmother, "What makes the bread rise?" The grandmother explains that yeast releases a gas as it feeds on a sugar. So that's a problem, okay? That's the problem that John wants addressed. Okay. So specifically, John wonders if the amount of sugar used in the recipe will affect the size of the bread loaf. So this is now the specific problem or question, okay, of John. Then after a problem, okay, we now come to the next step. But of course, be careful. Let's have this caution. Be careful how you use affect and affect. These two words are different because affect is usually a noun and affect is a verb. The effect of the sugar amounts on the rising of bread, but we use the word affect in this statement. How the sugar affect the rising of the bread. Okay, so be careful of the use of words affect and affect. One is noun and the other is verb. As to our second step, we now have our observation or conducting of research. So, in case of John researches areas of baking and fermentation and tries to come up with a way to test his question. He keeps all of his information on this topic in a journal. So in this particular step, you need to read, research, and take down notes, right? That's how we do observation and research. John talks with his teacher and she gives him an experimental design or diagram to help him set up his investigation. So John talks or consults with an expert, in this case, his teacher. The next step is for John to formulate a hypothesis. After talking with his teacher and conducting further research, he comes up with a hypothesis. According to him, this is his hypothesis. If more sugar is added, then the bread will rise higher. So how did John came up with this hypothesis? Of course, this is the educated guess of John, but of course, in coming up with a hypothesis, there should be a basis for this one. And, diba, ang ginawa ni John is nakapagbasa siya ng iba-ibang article or sources, books, journals, okay, patungkol sa baking and fermentation. And ito yung ginawa niyang hypothesis base po doon. Okay? So, hindi lang po ito basta hula, may basehan sa paggagawa ng hypothesis. That's the hypothesis of John. And John needs to test this through an experiment. Okay? So, hindi pa to yung hindi niya alam kung tama ito or mali ito. But ang point ng scientific method is for us researchers to prove if this is valid or not valid. So, hypothesis is an educated guess, as I have mentioned, about the relationship between the independent and the dependent variables. So, these variables will be defined in the next few slides. So, take note, we have two variables, independent and independent. Independent and dependent variables. Variables are the things that can be changed in an experiment. Again, the root word for variable is vary. So we need to say it changes. Okay? Things that can be changed in an experiment. In the example given, the amount of each ingredient used, the temperature baked, the amount of time baked are few of the variables. So again, according to the experiment that John will be conducting, yung variables doon sa study niya is yung amount of each ingredient. Bakit ito isang variable? Kasi yung amount, iba pwede naman siya magbago. The temperature on which he will bake, for example, the bread, that's another variable. Because yung temperature nagbabago, di ba? We have 70 degrees Celsius, for example, 60 degrees Celsius. The amount of time baked as well. Okay? Pwede natin magkaroon ng 1 hour, 2 hours, few minutes, 13 minutes. Okay? So these are examples of variables. Now, independent variable, or we call it sometimes as manipulated variable, is a factor that is changed on purpose in an experiment. Okay? So, in the example, maybe John can use the following. We have 25 grams, 50 grams, 100 grams, 250 grams, 500 grams of sugar in his experiment. So in this case, the independent variable is the amount of sugar. Because the amount of sugar is a variable that can be manipulated. It's a variable that can be changed in the purpose of an experiment. Next, aside from that, we also have the dependent variable. Okay, the dependent, or what we call responding variable, is the factor that may change and is measured during the experiment. This response, the response to the independent variable is the dependent variable. So in the case of John's experiment, it would be the size of the loaf or the bread. Okay? So yun yung dependent. It's the factor that will change, okay, out of the independent variable. So yung independent kanina, probably maybe the cost. Here, the dependent variable is the effect. Ano ba yung magpapabago sa size ng loaf of bread? Of course, we have the independent variable. In that case, the amount of sugar. Okay? So, yun yung pagkakaiba ng independent sa dependent. Independent is the cause. Dependent is the effect. Or dependent is the response to the independent variable. Now, after that, you need to understand the key term, experiment. His teacher helps him come up with a procedure and list of needed materials. She discusses with John how to determine the control group. So now, it's a control group. In a scientific experiment, the control group is the group that serves as the standard of comparison. The control group may be a no treatment or an experimenter selected group. So from the term itself, control, this is the group wherein wala kang ginagawa, diba? Okay, this is different from the experimental group. So control group, so hahayaan mo lang yung grupo na to na na-expose sa natural ng kanilang mga variables. So you will not alter or change yung nararanasan ng grupo. Okay? Again, the purpose of this is for you to have that standard of comparison. The control group is exposed to the same condition as the experimental group, except for the variable being tested. So, kasi yung lahat ng variables na you want to retain in the same condition, okay, both for control group and experimental group, okay, kailangan the same yun. Okay? Ang pagkakaiba lang ng control sa experimental, meron kang tinitest, okay, na mga variables mo. So, all experiments should have a control group. So, hindi po pwedeng natanggal yung control group. Kasi, we conduct experiment on the basis na meron tayong tinitingnan na control group. And this control group should not receive a treatment or a variable that is being tested. In this specific example of John, because his grandmother always used 50 grams of sugar in her recipe, John is going to use that amount in his control group. Okay? So, yung bagay na yun na i-retain natin, okay, that is what we call for the control group. Now, constants. What is constant? Constant is a factor that is being kept the same, right? So John's teacher reminds him to keep all the other factors the same so that any observed changes in the bread can be attributed to the variation in the sugar. Okay? So, lahat ng bagay na i-retain natin can be regarded as constant. The constants in an experiment are all the factors that the experimenter or the researcher attempts to keep the same. Now, can you think of some constants for these experiments? Can you think now? What do you think are the other constants for the experiment that is to be conducted by John? Okay, they might include other ingredients, right? To the bread recipe, the oven used, the rise time, the brand of ingredients, the cooking time, the type of pan used, air temperature, humidity where the bread was rising, oven temperature, and then the age of the yeast. So these are what we call constants. These are the things that are left to be the same or true to all groups. So hindi ito binabago. Those things are given. Okay? Now, as to the experiment, John writes out his procedure for his experiment along with the material list in his journal. He has both of this checked by his teacher, where she checks for any safety concerns. Remember, students, that you need to conduct an experiment with guidance or supervisions of an adult. Probably you can have your teacher, parents, or any experts or adult ones. Okay? And then trials refer to the replicate groups that are exposed to the same conditions in an experiment. John is going to test its sugar variable 3 times. So when we see trials, these are replicates. So these are repetitions. Okay? Bakit kailangan ng trials? Kasi probably along the way, di ba, kung isa lang yung ginagawa natin, baka may mali tayong magawa out of our procedures. So mas maganda na meron tayong trials. And then after that, John needs to collect and analyze the result. In this case, John comes up with a table and he can use to record his data. John gets all his materials together and carries out his experiment. So here's the result of John's experiment. Let's say hypothetically these are the results. So the title of the table is the size of baked bread. Okay, measured length times width times height in cubic centimeter. So in this case, we have the amount of sugar. We have 25, 50, 100, 250, 500. Wherein the 50 gram of sugar is the control group. Then we have different trials or replicates. Trial 1, Trial 2, Trial 3. And these are the results of these different trials. And in the last column, you can show here the average size of the bread in cubic centimeter. How do we get the size? Average size, we just get the sum of these 3 and then divided by 2. Okay? So ito po yung tables, results ng experiment ni John. So now, try to observe the data found in the table. So yun yung pinakamalaking average size ng bread. Okay? Meron tayo dito sa control group na tinatawag. Okay. So John examines his data and notices that his control worked the best in this experiment, but not significantly better than 100 grams of sugar. Okay? So therefore, as part of his conclusion, John rejects his hypothesis, but decides to retest using sugar amounts between 50 grams and 100 grams. So, dahil hindi niya kontento si John, ang ginawa niya, he tried to retest, okay, and validate the result of the experiment by conducting another experiment. So once again, John gathers his materials and carries out this experiment. And here are the results. Okay, can you tell which of the group is the best? So ito na po yun. Nagkaroon na ng ibang variation sa amount of sugar. So 50, 60, 70, 80 grams. The same 3 trials were conducted, but of course the results differ now. And then, in terms of the average size, ano yung nakita natin na pinakamataas? Here, sa 70. So John finds that 70 grams of sugar produces the largest loaf, and therefore, based on that, his hypothesis is accepted. So tama pala yung hypothesis na ginawa or na unang naisulat ni John. Okay? His hypothesis is accepted. So, as to the last step, John tells his grandmother about his findings and prepares to present his project in science class. Diba? So, meron tuloy na share si John with his grandmother. So, therefore, that's the purpose of research. You need to communicate that to other people and share what have you found out. Okay. So that's how we come up with our scientific method. So it's just not a one-shot procedure. So it's a series of steps. It's a carefully crafted or step-by-step procedures, okay, for you to answer and arrive at a certain conclusion. So, as a summary, I want you to have this video for us to somewhat synthesize what we have learned in this scientific method.
The scientific method is about ordinary people doing ordinary things. That includes you, me, and other scientists in the world. The scientific method is just a process or steps taken to produce reliable results to answer a specific question. Maybe you think you don't use a scientific method in your life, but I can guarantee that you do. For example, imagine you wake up on a Saturday and you couldn't find your cell phone. That's an observation. Then you do a little research by thinking about the last time you had it. You suspect that it might be in the pocket of your pants from yesterday. That's a hypothesis. And when you check your pants, you're doing an experiment. But science and life don't always go as planned, and you find no cell phone in your pants pocket. So the second observation leads you to think again and recall what else you did yesterday. You remember that you put your cell phone in your backpack during school. So you decide it must be there, and you go and check. And lo, there it is. Life can continue, and you're so happy that you share the results with your best friend and explain why it took you so long to text them back. Science. These are the steps of the scientific method. And at any step, you can go back and repeat the process. Typically, after you conduct an experiment and conclude that your results aren't answering the question, you go back and try something else. And really truly, observations and research are going on the entire time. Science is a continually ongoing process. Now let's break down each of these steps into their component parts. All that can be observed with the 5 senses are included in observations. You use your sense of smell, sight, taste, touch, and hearing to make your observations in science. Research is an important step in science because it may answer other questions you have and help refine your experiment before you go down a path that leads to nowhere or conduct an experiment that's already been done. Make sure you use reliable sources to learn background information. Scientific journals and online sources that are vetted and trusted are best. Avoid information from blogs and out-of-date textbooks, as the information might not be reliable. Once you have your research completed, you can form your hypothesis, which is a prediction of what you believe will occur. It is often seen as an if-then statement and is very specific. Here's an example. If gummy bears are placed in water for 24 hours, then they will swell to over twice their original size. It has an if and a then, and uses specific terms that make this experiment repeatable. The experiment itself is made of several parts. Most experiments collect 2 types of data, qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative data relies on descriptions like soft, yellow, shiny, or wet. Quantitative data relies on numbers like 25 centimeters or 2.3 grams. Once you know what types of data you're going to collect, you can define the variables in your experiment. There is the independent variable, which is the thing you change to see how it affects your dependent variable, which is the thing you measure. So in the gummy bear example, the change in the experiment is that the gummy bears are being placed in water. The dependent variable is the volume of the gummy bear, which is measured before and after it's soaked in the water. A valid experiment will have both an experimental group, where the independent variable is altered, and a control group, which can be used to compare the experimental group to the normal or unaltered version. In the gummy bear experiment, the bears placed in water are the experimental group, and the dry gummy bears are the control, because that's how gummy bears normally are. So to summarize, an experiment should have an experimental group and a control group. The experimental group will have an independent variable and a dependent variable, and the data that is measured and collected can be qualitative, quantitative, or both. Thanks for watching this episode of Teacher's Pet. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at SciencePet.
So credits to the video from the site, from the YouTube channel Teacher's Pet. So again, thank you for that video. So let's proceed now to your module. Okay, so aside from the pre-test, you need to come up with this KWL chart. Before you begin with the next part of this module, fill in the first two columns and then fill in the last column after completing the module. Okay, so the KWL chart, K represents what I know, W represents what I want to know, and then L represents what I have learned. And then after that, you need to accomplish activity 1.1. So the directions are given. You need to interview at least 20 adult individuals who have children in your locality and ask the questions listed below. So take note, this one is somewhat gathering of data, okay, from those 20 adult individuals. So since we are now in pandemic, you can use texting, chatting in this activity since physical interview is not that advisable. So just strategize on how you can gather the data. So the question is, what is the most common ailment of children in your community? So take note that the following brackets, age brackets are included: 0 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, and 10 to 11. And then after that, you need to total the number of children, for example, experiencing this specific ailments. And then you need to answer these guide questions, these 4 guide questions. 1. What is the most common ailment in your locality? 2. What particular age bracket of the children mostly suffers from this ailment? 3. State the major health problems of the children in your locality. And 4. Write your own hypothesis. And then after that 1.1, this is now the time for you to answer activity 1.2. The direction is that you need to identify the problem in the picture below and make your own hypothesis. So, base sa picture, gagawa kayo ng problem, and from that problem, you will write your own hypothesis. First picture is given, another picture is given. Okay? For the third picture, we have here, okay, same. You need to write your problem, write your hypothesis based on the problem. Then the fourth picture, same, problem, hypothesis. So that's all. Did you get them now? How was it? Have you finished answering the written activities given in this module? Is it hard? I guess we're just starting, but I hope you got all the activities correct. Okay, So as to our last part, you need to reflect now on your learning. I want you to list down 3 words that you remember in this module or in this video lesson. Just 3 words. Okay? And then after that, I want you to answer this. What is the most essential learning or concept you picked in this module? Can you describe and explain it? So that's part of the reflect part or activity. So, congratulations for finishing the first part of Module 1. I hope you learned something from this. So, congratulations and thank you so much for bearing with me. Thank you for watching this video. So, I want you to, if you have questions, just comment those questions below. You may also type your grade and section in the comment section for monitoring purposes, so that I can assess whether you are watching my video lessons. Again, if you have questions, feel free to ask me. So thank you so much. Bye.